This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane Tatum and Tonya Lead.
Welcome to IA Forward. And Shane, welcome back. You did a fantastic job this morning talking with the Lufkin Angelina County Chamber of Commerce. So I think since you're already prepared from your fabulous presentation this morning, that's what we should talk about.
I'm doubling my words today. That sounds like a really, really good plan. Talking to you in this little solo one-on-one kind of podcast event versus talking to a group of people, it's always a little bit different. And this morning, it was kind of this weird deja vu thing. It took me back to 2020. The first time I gave a presentation to this particular group of people was right in the heart of COVID. And it was very similar to our podcast setup in some way. There was a media guy, Blake, and there was a camera in my face. And on the other side of the camera, I was staring at Blake, and it was like, okay, give your presentation. And there was no people in the room. It was the first time I think I'd ever done anything like that. It was so weird. It was so strange, and it wasn't normal. But now, like what we do and how we record podcasts, it's kind of normal. But for today, everybody's hearing my voice multiple times.
Welcome to IA Forward.
Welcome to the Kumbaya.
I know, you almost got rah-rah there on me. I'm kind of proud.
All right, I'm trying. I'm growing.
Now you're getting warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
So your presentation this morning was on honoring your commitments. And I'm actually going to post the slides from his PowerPoint on our social media pages. So check those out on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. But I bring that up because he starts his presentation that he gave with the picture of his family. And he actually ended the presentation with a picture of him holding hands with the fabulous Julie. To me, that was a great way of showing that you do honor your commitments to your family first.
I didn't know what the audience was going to be like. It wasn't a group of our Integra partner agents or people that I would be familiar with, and several of the people I would have met for the first time just today. I wanted to get out there kind of this really core thing about honoring your commitments, which would center around family, marriage, parenting, all of those things. And what hit me when I was putting this together is if you're going to talk about honoring your commitments, you kind of got to start there. I just thought it was a good place to start. It went over very well, and so I was glad, but that's just kind of the way I thought would be a good intro to honor your commitments.
You used a term in your presentation of a commitment pandemic, and I think that hit home with a lot of people.
Well, pandemic's the fancy buzzword, right? Because I think we officially announced we're out of the pandemic, but it's top of mind. It's buzzy. I wanted to play off of that, and that's where that came from. And I think it's true. The issue is I choose to say yes. And then it's this miserable, stressful feeling of why did I say yes to that? And that's the pandemic part, is people committing to things they're really not wanting to commit to. They say yes to it and then they don't show up, or they say yes to it and they just don't carry through, or they don't finish, to throw in there the Shane 2023 word of the year. They just commit, say yes, but they're really, really not committed.
People talk smack about our Gen Zs a lot. But this is something that I think that we can really learn from Gen Z, is if they don't want to do something as a whole, they say no, and then they move on. And I think that that's something that we as Gen Xers or Xennials, or even I think some of our older millennials, can really learn from Gen Z, is that ability to quickly and easily say no.
Yeah, and I think on the contrary, the Xers, we're yes people. We've talked about that before. We have this tendency to say yes before the sentence is finished, before the request is made. I don't know why. I don't know what the source of that is, but I know how I am, and I know how several of my peers are, and we struggle with this. I even made the comment of I'm a recovering yes man this morning during the presentation. Younger generations, they just don't feel guilty about that. It's one of those things that you kind of go, okay, no, you need to go to this. This is an event you need to be present at as a young business professional. And you're like, no, it's not my thing. And they just kind of go from there. And I kind of applaud them quietly.
One of my very best friend's daughters got her senior ring last week. And part of their senior ring ceremony is they were asked their favorite inspirational quote. And so as they walked up on the stage and they got their ring, their picture flashed up with their favorite quote, right? Well, her daughter picked something that she had heard me say several times, which was always say yes unless it's illegal or immoral. And I'm like, okay, wow. So that is the quintessential Gen X, and here this girl picks it. And I asked her about it later. I'm like, of all the things I've ever said, that's what you picked? I mean, really, that was what inspired you? And she said, yes. She said, I've actually gotten to do really cool things because my first natural instinct is to say no, but then I say yes because, it's not illegal or immoral. And I've had a really good time because of that. And so I don't think it's terrible to say yes. And in fact, one of the presentations that I've done for years is the power of saying yes. And that's one of the things that I've been able to do because I didn't have children and didn't have that commitment. And so we're not saying that saying yes is bad. We're just saying that it's okay to say no.
Well, it is. And I'll skip forward a little bit and we can circle back around. But one of the things within the presentation that I talked about was how to say yes or how to say no. And it's this idea that you need to be able to differentiate between, can you be authentic within this yes? Are you saying yes authentically? Are you saying yes because you authentically want to be there? Or you want to try something new? To your point, I can say, okay, I'm going to say yes for the rest of this year to anything that comes across my desk. I can be authentic with that because that's my commitment. I'm going to do that. So my take on it is be authentic and be passionate about it. If you can't be those things, then you probably ought to say no. That's the differentiator between what we're talking about and why we have this pandemic around commitment, because that's not what we do. What we do is we just say yes to something we don't want to do, and then we don't show up, or we ghost people, or we want to write someone's insurance. We want to be their agent, but then we don't have the best price. We don't save them thousands of dollars, and then we sit on the quote for weeks and give the customer a bad experience because we don't want to have to call them back. You can't have it both ways.
So I love that you brought that back to the commitment within our agencies. I think it's also a place that we not only have that kind of commitment to our clients, we have that kind of commitment to our team members as well.
That's why this resonates so well with me and why I'm hung on this commitment pandemic and wanting to do my part to help solve the problem. This whole idea of being committed to your employees, being committed to your business means being committed to your employees. It has to. Your people are your business. They are the core of it. You can't have a business without your people. Unless you're a solopreneur, a lot of you are going to at some point have employees. And those employees are maybe or maybe not going to be ultimately committed to you. And so you run down this path where you're like, well, I'm not going to commit to them if they don't commit to you. Well, what if they say the same thing? Well, then what do you really have? I've always loved this thing around employee development or training where the employer really just gets bitter about hiring people and losing people. And, they're like, well, I'm sick and tired of training people and spending this money and investing in people only for them to leave. And I had someone tell me a long time ago, what if you don't train them and they stay? Well, how good is that for your business? Committing to your employees and committing to this idea that you're going to help them become the best they can be. And yes, you are running the risk that they may go somewhere else and use those talents. But if that's their desire, you can't stop them. There's nothing you can do. The other piece of this is you need to look at yourself. Am I doing it the right way? Am I providing a culture and an environment where individuals can succeed and excel? And if I'm not, maybe I need to check myself. Maybe I need to look inwardly and go, okay, what can we do better? How can we make this a place where people don't want to leave? That whole commitment thing, not unlike an argument in a marriage. There's going to be some listening. There's should be some listening and compromise and understanding. If both of you are just, well, you hurt my feelings, well, you hurt my feelings too, well, then where do we go? What are we going to do? Where's the grace? There has to be grace. And so I think that's kind of where this is we get into this commitment argument and then we just perpetuate it. And that's where I think as leaders, we've got to step in and be different. We have to lead by example, and we have to be willing to make that commitment first.
One of my favorite shirts that I have says grace wins every time. And it's one of those things that I'm not a big t-shirt person, but I specifically have this one to remind myself on those days when I know that I need it. I'll actually go put my green t-shirt on that says this. And I love that concept of grace winning every time. And I think that when you look at things with grace, and it's one of the reasons that I love working for the Integra organization is because our leadership team leads with grace. And I think that that is such a valuable takeaway for our entrepreneurs, our agency owners when things get rough. That phrase is just a really great one. I had a sales manager one time that did not love the job that she was in. She did not love the fact that she had been sent to a small town in Northeast Louisiana. And she had a large sign in her office that said, "God, give me the grace to be in this place." And I never really knew exactly what message she was trying to send to us, but she was reminding herself of what she needed.
She sounds really warm and fuzzy.
She was from New Jersey.
There you go. Love my Jersey friends, but, a little bit different personality.
It was interesting to have that in your leader's office when you would walk in there.
Sure. You know what's interesting about meeting people from different parts of the country is just once you get to know them and once you understand their differences and how they kind of look at things and the lens that they look at things through, it just becomes really fascinating to me. And I've had the privilege of learning from and meeting individuals from all over the country, and it's just really interesting. And all of us have different views based on where we grew up. But I think that's part of this grace conversation. It might just sound a little different. They're coming from a different place. And I think that that's the whole issue around this commitment pandemic, is this world that is shaping our future generations' life experiences that becoming somewhat normalized. And we need to understand that. We need to understand that life experiences are going to be different when we're hiring that next generation, and they may interpret something completely different.
I'm going to bring up the transfer portal, which you and I had very similar thoughts on going into this year. And I would love to know if you have had any change of heart with that after being so involved with this generation of college athletes after this year.
There are some very specific exceptions that make sense. Let's just call it the 10% rule, the 10% exception. I'll even live with the Pareto principle in effect here 20% of the time, right? 80-20 rule. There are some exceptions, but no, through the first year of being a parent of a Power 5 Division I college athlete, overall, my opinion is still the same. I'm not a fan of the portal. I think there should be some restrictions and some parameters around the portal. When I was building this Honor Your Commitment presentation, I was looking up and researching, and the number that I saw from an ESPN article was that 6,000 NCAA football players entered the transfer portal since the beginning of the 2022 season. As of this recording, that's like 9 months ago. In the month of December 2022, over 2,000 entered the portal in just that month. That would have been at the end of the season. Bowl season has started. I can tell you in the month of May 2023, almost 500 collegiate softball players have entered the portal. And here is my watch and observe kind of thing on this. We are still dealing with the fallout of the COVID year. So the COVID havoc that was wreaked on college sports, not just on society as a whole, but it really wreaked havoc on the whole idea of you lost a year, so you get a COVID year. Now, I am of the opinion, along with my youngest daughter, that should have been reserved for the senior class. It should have been a one-year issue. But what they did is they allowed everyone, freshmen to seniors, in the year 2020 to have a COVID year. So next year, you will see the last of COVID year athletes on college rosters. And what that means, to put that in perspective, is that on the field this year, as a 18-year-old turning 19-year-old in season, that Emma played against 24, sometimes 25-year-olds. So it's one thing when you're a freshman playing against seniors. It's another thing when you're a freshman playing against second-year grad students. It's a whole nother perspective that has been put into play. If I got 5 years of experience, by my 5th year, I should be really, really good. And so it's really that experience factor. There, it might not have been the physical or anything like that, but it's that experience factor. And in college sports, experience is huge. There should have been parameters.
I'll tell you something that has really changed, and this has to do with transfer portal and NIL, is I am getting email messages every single day to donate to the LSU Bayou Collective. And I'm sure that y'all are probably getting the same thing for Texas A&M. I think y'all call it the fund.
The Jayhawk one is called the Mass Street Collective, after Massachusetts Street, downtown Lawrence. But yeah, everybody's got their collective, right? To your point.
And so now I'm getting asked to donate to the Tiger Athletic Fund if I want my season tickets and for all of those things, or if I want bowl game tickets or anything like that. And now I'm supposed to be giving to the Bayou Collective in order to have enough NIL money to pay our athletes to come to LSU. And so I'm really starting to wonder what that's going to look like for our athletes when they enter the workplace, because as we discussed on a previous podcast, if we only have 2% of our collegiate athletes go on to play professional ball, what does that look like for the other 98% of our collegiate athletes going into the workplace? I mean, there's not going to be this huge pool of money that boosters are putting together in order for these athletes to get NIL money when they go to work at the insurance agency.
It kind of puts this thing in place of, hey, if you'll pay me, I'll perform, instead of what we grew up on, which was I performed, now pay me. We've reversed this. And for the record, I think it's terrible. I do think that in certain sports, what I would call reasonable NIL, don't hold me to the numbers, but I think this is really close. Texas Tech softball program, every player, walk-on or scholarship that makes the roster, that's on the roster, I believe is receiving $10,000 a year, kind of like a roster bonus. So what that means in a equivalency sport where you don't have full scholarships, softball, baseball are two of those sports that they have to manage 25 to 35 player rosters with a whopping 11.7 scholarships. So they have to split up their money. They have to do all this stuff. Well, what that allows a program to do in an equivalency sport is it actually allows them to get to a close full scholarship scenario. So NIL is bringing something to the table to fix what the NCAA has not fixed, what the NCAA has messed up. I will go down the path of saying I love NIL for that particular purpose. On the flip side of that, I forget the athlete, I think he was coming out of Michigan. I don't know how true this is. The rumor mill was that he went into the portal, grad transfer. He's obviously a good player, possibly a future NBA player. And the rumor was around social media circles that his recruitment out of the portal went up to around $2 million. That was the NIL deal that this particular young athlete got to make it to a program. He got offered that in various programs up to that mark. And so it's ridiculous. Pay me and then I'll perform. Try saying that as an agency owner to a new sales executive. If this is their life experience, we have some work to do. We have a lot of work to do when they come to us and we're wanting to hire this young person in this sales role and train them up. And is their expectation all of a sudden going to be, well, what kind of money do I get for taking the job? What kind of money do I get for coming to work for you? Well, you're going to be in sales, and so your compensation is going to be based on your success, your performance. And they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Because we've changed the dynamic. We've changed the conversation. And I think it's a little bit disastrous. But as agency owners, we need to get our heads around this and understand this, because there could be some of that expectation in some weird way that leads us down this path of needing to have these conversations.
Getting back to the idea of commitment and our agencies, one of the things during your talk this morning was community relations and community involvement. And I would like for you to share with our listeners a little bit about the point person rule.
I'm so excited that you're asking me to continue to get my words out and continue to talk. Thank you for that invitation. That's wonderful. Julie sends her thanks for this evening so that I don't go home and spend another 10,000 words that she has to listen to. So this is something that sort of got created out of failure to some degree. The point person rule, and just to give you a little better background, it comes from, we have a community relations representative. She's the director. She's the person that leads our community relations effort. It's her job. Her job is to show up at places, be visible, be involved in the community. We also have a community relations team, which consists of various leadership people. We have some family members, just individuals that are representative as a whole of our organization. And a community relations event must have a point person. We classify that in two different ways. There's the must-do events. There's the Catfish Festival. It's a must-do event. We're a Main Street business. There's a Catfish Festival in October. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on in our community on a Saturday. We must do this event. We will be there. We will contribute. We will be involved. That is Melissa's role, unless someone raises their hand and says, I'm really passionate about the Catfish Festival and I want to be the lead. If no one does that, then we do it by Melissa automatically becoming the point person. Then there are all these other outlier things. There are things that are not must-do events. And they're fun, they're nice. If no one has the passion or the dedication to be the point person, then we don't do the event, period.
For instance, the Christmas parade, the Huntington Christmas parade. We're a Main Street business. If we're setting up a tent in front of the business and giving everyone free hot chocolate, warm and fuzzies, putting a vehicle in the parade and throwing things at people, that's one of those things that's not necessarily a must-do event, but a fun event.
It's a fun event. And if someone in our community relations team does not feel passionate about that, does not feel like they want to be the point person, then we don't do the event. We just missed the event. That's just an example. And the reason is because if you are the point person, you do it. Unless you die, unless you are in intensive care, I'm not even sure just being in the hospital is enough. You have to be in the intensive care unit, obviously joking here, but you must do this. Like, you cannot back out of this commitment a week before the event. You can't change your mind the morning of. And the one I picked on the most was sponsoring a table at some chamber event, or sponsoring a table. These are $800, $1,000 tables. They're usually great fundraisers for some incredible cause. And my pet peeve is that we don't do that unless there's a point person that makes sure and has the responsibility to fill every chair at that table. Because my pet peeve is to spend $800 on a table and have no one at the table, or $800 on the table and Melissa sitting there awkwardly by herself. This is just this rule of, if we have to have a point person in order to commit, and if we commit, it's a no-fail situation. We will be there. We can't not be there, to use some wonderful Southern grammar. It has to happen. It's a no-fail situation.
Another phrase that you used this morning was, the risk is worth it. And I really liked that one.
That was about, as leaders, us committing first, right? Us being the example, us leading by example, setting the example. And And it's worth the risk that you do this. As a leader, lean in, step forward, make the commitment to your people first, make the commitment to something first. And the reason I phrased it as the risk is worth it is because the risk is that you don't get a commitment from the employee. The employee leaves you after 6 months or whatever. Well, guess what? I'm going to bet you're going to learn from that, and you're going to be a whole lot better on the second employee. And I think that is really important. Like, just because we do something and it fails doesn't mean we should stop doing it. And that's what I mean by the risk is worth it, because if we learn, it's worth, if you amateurize that failure out over 30 years and you think about what you've learned from it and what you gain from it and what success comes from it, then what is that really worth? It might be a failure that becomes being worth $1 million to you. That's an incredible ROI. That is just something that to me says the risk is worth it to step forward, to be the example and make the commitment first. Otherwise, you're just sitting each other going, okay, who's going to commit first, right? We're kind of playing this game and it doesn't work. It doesn't feel good. And as leaders, I think we should take that step.
I'm going to leave us today with this quote from Pat Riley. There are only two options regarding commitment. You're either in or you're out. There's no such thing as life in between.
Love it. Attitude's a choice. Make a great one.
Bye, y'all.
Ready to get the ball rolling with your independent agency? Learn more at IntegraAgent.com. That's IntegraAgent.com. Thank you for joining us on IA Forward. Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now, or learn more at IAForward.com.